Today I'm going to tell you about 28-year-old Mariam's story from Gaza, Palestine. She was a teacher who had dedicated her entire life to educating children, but on this particular morning, she had to give the most difficult lesson of her career. It wasn't about mathematics or Arabic literature, it was about saying goodbye. This was the last day of Al-Noor Elementary School, and Mariam had to find a way to explain to 30 young hearts why their safe haven was closing forever. Imagine being a teacher who has to tell her students that their school, their second home, their place of dreams and learning, will no longer exist. I know this might be heartbreaking to hear, but imagine if this were your own child's teacher facing such an impossible situation. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel so we can keep sharing these important stories from Palestine. What did Mariam teach her students in that final lesson? And how did she keep their dreams alive? Stay with me until the end to find out. 28-year-old Mariam Qassemi had been teaching at Al-Noor Elementary School in Gaza City, Palestine, for 8 years. With her warm smile and infinite patience, she had become more than just a teacher to her students. She was their mentor, their protector, and for many, the closest thing to a mother figure they had during their school hours. Mariam had grown up in the beach camp in Gaza, where education was often interrupted but never abandoned. Her own teachers had inspired her to pursue her dreams despite the challenges around her. She studied education at the Islamic University of Gaza, graduating at the top of her class with one simple goal: to give the children of Palestine the gift of knowledge that no one could ever take away from them. Al-Noor Elementary School was a modest two-story building that had been serving the community for over 40 years. The classrooms were small, the desks were old and scratched with the initials of generations of students, but within those walls, magic happened every single day. Mariam's classroom was on the second floor, with windows that overlooked a small courtyard where children played during recess. For 8 years, Mariam had arrived at school every morning at 7 o'clock, 30 minutes before the first bell. She would use that quiet time to prepare her lessons, arrange the small library corner she had created with books donated by families, and write inspiring messages on the blackboard for her students to see when they arrived. Her third-grade class consisted of 30 students, aged 8 to 10 years old. There was little Ahmed, who dreamed of becoming a doctor, 9-year-old Fatima, who wrote the most beautiful poems, shy Omar, who was brilliant at mathematics but too scared to speak up, and energetic Layla, who wanted to be a teacher just like Miss Mariam when she grew up. These children came from families who worked as fishermen, shopkeepers, taxi drivers, and seamstresses. Their parents made enormous sacrifices to keep their children in school, sometimes choosing between buying bread and buying notebooks. But they all believed in the power of education to create a better future for their sons and daughters. If this story is touching your heart so far, please give it a like. Can you imagine if your own child's teacher had to face such heartbreaking circumstances? Let's continue with Mariam's incredible journey. Every morning, Mariam would greet each student individually as they entered the classroom. "Good morning, my dear scholars," she would say with genuine warmth. "What wonderful things will we discover together today?" Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even the most reluctant students would find themselves excited to learn. Mariam had developed her own special teaching methods over the years. She knew that children in Gaza faced challenges that textbooks couldn't address, so she created lessons that were both educational and emotionally supportive. When teaching Arabic literature, she would choose stories about brave heroes and resilient characters. During mathematics, she would use examples that related to their daily lives, counting the fishing boats in the harbor, calculating the ingredients needed for their mother's famous naif recipe. The school had very limited resources. There were no computers, no science laboratory, and often not enough textbooks for every student. But Mariam had turned these limitations into opportunities for creativity. She made educational games from cardboard, created math manipulatives from bottle caps, and turned storytelling into an art form that could transport her students to any place in the world. Her most beloved tradition was the dream wall she had created in the back of the classroom. Each student had written their future aspirations on colorful paper cutouts and pinned them to the wall. "I want to be a pilot and fly all over the world," wrote Ahmed. "I will be a famous poet," declared Fatima. "I want to build houses for everyone," shared Omar. And Layla had written, "I want to teach children and make them smile like Miss Mariam does." But on November 15th, everything changed. Mariam arrived at school that morning to find the principal, Mr. Abu Khaled, waiting for her with tears in his eyes. "Sister Mariam," he said quietly, "I have news that will break all of our hearts. The school, we have been ordered to close. The building is no longer considered safe for the children." Mariam felt the world spinning around her. "But where will the children go?" she asked, though she already knew the painful answer. Most families couldn't afford private schools, and the other public schools in the area were already overcrowded. Some families are leaving the area entirely, Mr. Abu Khalid explained. Others will try to find space in schools farther away. But many of the children will simply stop attending school altogether. That night, Mariam went home to the small apartment she shared with her elderly mother and sat at her kitchen table, staring at the lesson plans she had prepared for the rest of the school year. How do you tell 30 children that their dreams might have to wait? How do you explain to 8-year-olds that the place where they felt safe and loved would no longer be there for them? When Mariam's mother, Khalil, saw her daughter's tears, she sat beside her and took her hands. "My daughter," she said gently, "a real teacher doesn't need a building to teach. A real teacher's classroom is wherever her students are." The next morning, Mariam walked into her classroom for what she knew would be the last time. Her 30 students were already seated, chatting excitedly about their weekend adventures, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. "Good morning, my dear scholars," Mariam said, her voice slightly trembling but her smile as warm as ever. "Today, we're going to have a very special lesson. It's going to be different from any lesson we've had before. How can we live in a world where doctors are forced to make such choices? Where children like little Layla have to fight for their lives instead of playing with toys? When will humanity learn that peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of justice and compassion for all people?" The clock on the hospital wall showed 11:15. The ambulance driver, a brave young man named Youssef, approached Dr. Omar. "Doctor, we need to leave now. The roads will be too dangerous soon." Who are we taking?" Dr. Omar closed his eyes and made the most difficult decision of his medical career. He walked into the maternity ward where young Fatima was fighting for her life. Her husband looked up at him with desperate hope in his eyes. "We're taking Fatima first," Omar announced. "She's young, she has the best chance of surviving the journey, and she has a newborn who needs his mother." It was a medical decision, but it felt like he was betraying the other two families who trusted him. As they loaded Fatima into the ambulance, Omar promised Abu Ahmed's family that he would do everything possible to stabilize their father until another evacuation could be arranged. He promised his brother that he would stay by little Layla's side and fight for her life with everything he had. But promises felt hollow when you're watching an ambulance drive away, knowing it might be the last chance for the patients left behind. What happened next was something that Dr. Omar would never forget. As the ambulance disappeared into the night carrying Fatima to safety, the hospital staff, the families of the patients, even other sick people who could barely stand, all came together in a way that showed the true spirit of the Palestinian people. Abu Ahmed's eldest son, a mechanic, somehow managed to repair an old hospital van that had been out of service for months. "My father taught me that when there's no solution, you create one," he said, working through the night with whatever tools he could find. Meanwhile, Dr. Omar stayed by his niece's bedside, using every technique he had learned in 12 years of trauma surgery. He monitored her vital signs constantly, adjusted her medications by the minute, and refused to leave her side even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. By dawn, a miracle had occurred. The makeshift van was running, and little Layla had stabilized enough to be transported. Abu Ahmad, surrounded by the love of his large family, was also strong enough for the journey south. In a convoy of hope, the repaired van, 2 private cars, and even a neighbor's old truck, the remaining patients and their families made their way to safety together. It wasn't the medical evacuation they had planned, but it was something more powerful. It was a community refusing to let anyone be left behind. Dr. Omar rode in the van with his niece, holding her small hand as they traveled through the checkpoints and barriers that divided their homeland. As he watched the sun rise over the hills of Palestine, he made a silent promise, not just to Layla, but to all the children of his homeland: "One day, you will wake up to mornings filled with peace instead of fear." 3 weeks later, all 3 patients had made full recoveries. Fatima returned home to her husband and baby son. Abu Ahmad was back in the neighborhood square, helping children with their homework. And little Layla was running around her uncle's house again, asking if she could play with his stethoscope. But the story of that night taught Dr. Omar something profound about his calling as a healer in Palestine. Sometimes, the greatest medicine is not found in hospitals or ambulances, it's found in the unbreakable spirit of a people who refuse to give up on each other, who turn impossible choices into opportunities for miracles. When will the children of Palestine, the children of all nations, be able to dream of becoming doctors to heal people instead of to save them from wars? When will mothers give birth in hospitals prepared for celebration instead of evacuation? The answer lies not in the hands of politicians or armies, but in the hearts of ordinary people who choose compassion over hatred, peace over conflict. If you don't want doctors like Omar to face such impossible choices anymore, Please like this video so these stories can reach more people around the world. Right now, thousands of people are watching this story. Let's make sure Dr. Omar's voice, and the voices of all medical heroes in Palestine, are heard everywhere. Can you imagine if your own father were a doctor forced to choose between saving lives? Can you imagine if your own child were lying in a hospital bed, waiting for an ambulance that might never come? Think about the last time you visited a hospital for a routine checkup. How different would it feel if that hospital were under threat of evacuation? Every like, every comment shows that heroes like Dr. Omar are not forgotten. If you believe that every child deserves to grow up in a world where hospitals are places of healing, not evacuation, leave a Palestinian flag emoji in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to show that you stand with medical professionals who risk everything to save lives. Tomorrow we'll bring you another story that will remind you of the power of human courage in the darkest of times. Don't miss it. Subscribe so we can continue sharing these important stories of hope and resilience from Palestine. Will you share a prayer for doctors like Omar and all the children of Palestine in the comments? They need our support, our voices, our commitment to peace. Show your reaction, let them know that their stories matter, and that the world is watching. Note, the names mentioned in this story have been changed for privacy purposes. This story is inspired by real events experienced by medical professionals during times of conflict in Palestine. Subscribe so we can continue sharing these important stories of courage and hope from Palestine. Will you share a prayer for teachers like Mariam and all the children of Palestine in the comments? They need our support, our voices, and our commitment to ensuring that every child has access to quality education. Show your reaction, let them know that their dedication matters, and that the world believes in the power of education to create a better future. Note, the names mentioned in this story have been changed for privacy purposes. This story is inspired by real events experienced by educators and students during times of conflict in Palestine.